Good morning, guys. Can you guys hear me? Can I get
Yes.
a wave? All right, thank you. We're gonna wait for maybe a minute or so for people to join, and then we're gonna get started. All right, we're gonna get started. Thank you for those who joined on time. So I'm gonna share my screen. I don't have anything specific when it comes to an agenda, but I do have a couple things that I wanted to do. First of all, is to review at a high level the materials that we have covered so far, and well, for the whole course basically. And secondly, is to talk about the exam at a high level, as well as I've posted some test, sample questions, and you're welcome to work on them on your own. There are some multiple choice and short answers. Short answers should have the should have the model answer or model or suggestions. But as you know, there's not necessarily a definitive way of answering those questions just because a lot of times it's dependent on how you argue certain things, right? So I will give you additional tips when it comes to answering those questions as well. So you're welcome to raise your hand or maybe even put something in the chat. I am hoping that if I miss anything in the chat, and some of you who are here, who saw the chat, if you don't mind just reminding me, just because I have to navigate multiple screens. So let's get started. The information technology audit, like I said, it's an extension of regular audit. So many of those concepts that you've learned in the past, including the evidence quality, the way to or ways together. Let me just start the recording. It is being recorded. Whoops, sorry. I think I paused. I pressed the wrong button, resume. I'm going to record it one more time. It is going to be recorded, and I will post a link to the website, to the Quarkus site. Like I said, it's an extension of our regular audit, and that's why many of our auditing procedures and quality of evidence, how do we gather evidence, would be applicable. In answering exam questions, please be more specific to the IT situation, IT examples, IT components, or IT, basically more IT. Please, do not provide answers that are very generic or very accounting. For example, reconciliation. You may say reconciliation, but be very specific in terms of what are we reconciling. Reconciling the list of users who have been granted access versus, who actually have access, that's fine. Because they are IT examples. But reconciling account balances, things like that, those are more accounting side. So they would not be very useful in getting you a high grade in the questions for an IT audit course. All right, so let's just go through that at a super high level. I'm not going to spend too much time. My plan is to spend about 35 minutes just to go over the slides. And as you know, there are quite a few slides, so I'm not going to cover everything. If there's anything you want me to stop or slow down, please let me know, and I will explain a little bit more. Lecture 1, this is the deck from the recording. You do have recordings already, so I'm not going to repeat a lot of things that has been said already. But I do want to draw a couple of things. First of all, many students don't necessarily understand the differences between external and internal auditor or auditors. So one works for the company, the other one is more independent. They are being paid. So they do have another set of financial pressure in a way, right? Internal auditors are reporting to management, therefore they may, they may experience some pressure from management when it comes to what they can or should report. External auditors likewise has somewhat, I wouldn't say a similar pressure, but also pressure as well. Financial pressure. A lot of times, the audit field is highly competitive. So they may have to go in at a lower rate, and therefore that lower rate may not allow them for a proper audit, execution, right? Audit plan execution and sample testing and things, stuff like that. So different pressure, different pain points, but it is the industry. This is the landscape of the industry, at least at the current time. So IT auditor is a subset of audit, and they depending on who they work for, a lot of times they support the financial statements auditor for an external audit. And like I said, all accounting systems are being processed, all accounting information are being processed by systems, accounting systems and other systems, and they're sitting, being installed on, many of the stacks that we talked about. So if we ignore the IT components, then there's no assurance or guarantee that the information we're auditing is good to begin with. And that's why IT audit is very important, if not the foundation of it. So, profession ethics, I think we talked about all of those already. So I'm going to close this deck unless anyone wants me to continue. In lecture one, this is the Where's Water. I don't think you've seen this, but today's agenda, I think we talked about ITIS. If I'm not mistaken, there should not be any definition questions on the exam. There's no point in testing those, but you should be expected to understand the definition or differences between different things. For example, ISIT, but don't worry, that will not be on the exam because it's too easy. Internal controls, well, that's the foundation of our discussion. Internal controls, everything else kind of build onto internal controls because internal controls are, in various stacks or components. For example, the network, the firewall, operations, application controls, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, this is, I think, the famous or infamous slide about ITGC, general control, IT dependent controls, and application controls. And then we expand that by including manual versus automated, and then preventive, detective, corrective, as well as physical, logical, security controls, and things like that. I think by now you guys should be an expert in preventive, detective, and corrective controls. And we're going to go through some examples as well. But the manual versus automated may throw people off. It's easily understandable, but thinking about applying those concepts in IT may be a little challenging. I acknowledge that. But this is the area that we operate in, and that's why the expectation is that we do have a good understanding on them. The IT stacks, I think we talked about too many times. You should be fairly familiar with it. The generalist versus application auditors, there are additional slides talking about that, but hopefully by now you do have a good understanding on the differences between application, which is primarily focusing on this stack, and then the ITGC, the general computer controls, which is basically the rest of the stacks, right? Data center facilities, the Windows or Linux platform, the network, and even the database. It's generally considered to be a general control or general controls under general controls, general IT controls. And the application controls then is specific to the application. And like I said, a typical organization, a large organization, may have upwards of thousands of applications that they use. Even you and I, we use so many applications, different websites, different banks, and so on and so forth. Albeit that many of those controls are not under our responsibility, right? We only get to pick maybe even the password. Sometimes there are additional settings on the application we can modify. For example, the dark mode versus the regular theme, things like that. Those are settings, but none of them are so-called the security controls or application controls that matters to the application. Why is that the case? Because the application owners, in that case, the organization owning those applications, they don't want us to be tampering with those, right? So, um, roles of the audit team, I think we talked about many of those already. One key distinction is that this course is not about data extraction. This should be covered under the regular audit using ACL, audit command language, or other tools to extract information and help you do things faster. But this is not what we're talking about. I'll pause for a second and see if anyone has any questions before I move on to lecture 2. I am going rather quick, but if you want me to slow down, like I said, on anything, just let me know. Yep, go ahead. There's a question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm kind of unclear on what logical controls are, or like what leads them to be named as logical controls,
Yep.
because it's a bit counterintuitive, I think.
Yeah, so anything that's not physical, it's logical control. So any settings, any configurations, passwords, access control, and things like that, those are all logical controls, right? Physical controls are something you can see, you can touch physically. So getting into the door, environmental controls, like for example, the temperature and things like that, those are physical things. But anything on a computer, like through a computer, are logical controls. So as an example, your laptop, right? What is the physical controls on your laptop? Basically, there are none, right? Unless you lock it, meaning that using a lock, or you put it in a bag, or you put it in a drawer and lock it. Otherwise, that there's not much physical control on your laptop. Once you open your laptop, you log on to your system, and then you log on to Google Chrome, you log on to your email, Quarkus, and things like that. All those logging on are logical controls.
Mhm. Oh, okay. Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
so apply that to a server. Most of the time, we experiencing server-based systems logically because we don't even know where the servers are, right? That's why we didn't focus too much on physical control, although we use many examples to illustrate. But a majority of the controls that we talked about are logical controls. Are we
Oh,
good?
see. Uh, yeah, thank you.
Okay, good question. So lecture 2, ID audit process is an extension of the audit. I'm looking for this diagram right here. This is the lecture that we talk about risk assessment. And risk assessment has been discussed in almost every lecture. The threat, the risk, vulnerability, exposure, probability, ease of exploit, things like that. Those are all part of the risk assessment. We do risk assessment first because we don't have all the time in the world, right? We don't have all the resources in the world to do an audit. That's why we have to be picky. Materiality is a guideline, but it's not the only thing. The key thing for this lecture, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is the interconnectedness of something. Let me see, test of controls. There are actually good information in the slide deck, right? So this is a diagram talking about Windows users. So password policy, it's a little small, but you have those in your slide deck. Page 33 of the main deck, lecture 2. Page 33, lecture 2 of the main deck. It does talk to password history, how many passwords to remember, which we talked about. Password age, meaning how long do you remember the password for? Sorry, how long are you allowed to use that password for? There's a minimum and maximum. And we talk about minimum because we don't want you to change your password immediately after changing it. So, you have a preferred password and you're being forced to change it. If the password age, how long do you have to use the password for? A minimum duration before you can change it again. If that has been set to 0, then you can change it immediately. Therefore, change it back to your favorite password. We don't want that. So combine it with password history, remembering the last 10 passwords you have used, and the minimum age you have to use a password for, let's say minimum 10 days. Therefore, 10 days times 10 times is 100 days. You have to wait a minimum of 100 days before you can go back to your favorite password that you had before. So that is the password age. and the password history. And keep in mind, password age has the minimum and maximum as well. How long can you use a password for? I.e., 45 days is the maximum you can use it for before you're being forced to change it. That's the maximum age. Let's see. Documentation, those are communications. I think those are just usual uh, stuff. So let me just go to the other deck, lecture two. All right. Yeah, this is the one that we repeated. And this is a center facility you've seen yesterday as well, I believe, or at least for one of the classes. Interconnected, yeah, this is the one that we talk about interconnected, even though a system is maybe deemed to be very immaterial. And how do we decide whether or not something is immaterial? Is it a cost or is it something else? Obviously, it's not the cost, right? The system may cost nothing because it's an Excel spreadsheet, or may cost, I don't know how much Excel minimally, but what you store, on the Excel sheet matters, right? If you have all your customer database, if you have all your password being stored there, then the system may be worth practically next to nothing. However, the value to the organization is very high just because of the nature of the data you're storing, right? So materiality sometimes does not matter or is not as straightforward when it comes to systems, right? So you have to consider what is it being processed, what is being stored, and so on and so forth. The perimeter, we talked about that. I think we did talk about two of the quizzes already. So you should be fairly familiar with the perimeter. And perimeter is a logical boundary. And I think one of the quiz questions was physical boundary can no longer be used to define the network perimeter. System components, big components, small components, those are my terminologies. But hopefully it can help you understand, right? Big components are data center, computer rooms, branch office, department, maybe even UTM as one big component. But within the UTM's network, there are many small components, right? Individual users, individual computers, the IoT devices, and so on and so forth, right? I'm suggesting to consider the path. Path means that how two components are connected, right? It can be on the internet, over the internet, within the network, or anywhere in between. And as long as it can get to one component to another, then they're control points. Whether or not we are controlling them becomes the important question, right? Because those are the internal controls that can be implemented and put in strategic places. You put firewalls in between those components, and you can control the traffic. I know I'm going fast. I'm going to pause for a second really quick and see if anyone has, well, now may be a good time. Any questions so far? There are several CAS that we keep referring to, CAS 315, 330. I think those are a couple, but they are all pointing to the fact that as an auditor, as part of the audit, you need to have an appreciation or good understanding of the of the components of the network. What are we auditing? The universe, per se, the audit universe, before you dive into the audit. So talked about those. Any questions on lecture 2 components? Lecture 3 is governance, and let me see if there are any key things that I want to highlight. Introduce a couple frameworks, ITIL, COBIT, and then COSO is the other one, I think, or ISO 27001, 27002, those are different components. I thought COSO is mentioned somewhere. And if you remember yesterday when we reviewed the DigitalOcean's SOC report, the security report, SOC 2, was basically referencing many of those components or requirements from COSO. Why? Because they're best practice, right? Why reinvent the wheel if there's already a good set of procedures or objectives to borrow from or to utilize? But mind you, that SOC 2 that we reviewed yesterday was not the comprehensive COSO framework. They just pick and choose those components within the COSO that are relevant to them, or maybe that's that fit their environment. Steering committee, strategy, those are fairly standardized stuff. Risk assessment, again, we talked about that. Let me see if there's anything worth talking about. COSO, yeah, COSO is right there. Insurance, cyber insurance. All right, so let me go to the class discussion deck. Discussion deck. I think it's this one. This is just mapping back to the CPA principles. Sorry, the CPA learning guidelines. TRA, this is the class we talked about all these components. No definitions again, but make sure you understand and be able to apply them. Just because if needed, I will provide the definition first, just like in previous quizzes and whatnot. I believe in the afternoon class yesterday, we were talking about corrective controls, and I gave you the definition. You can expect something similar, if something like that, it's on the exam. What's missing? What about indirect, direct damages, exposure? Some of those may not be fully identified here. So, does anyone want me to talk about this one more time, or are we okay to move forward? I'll take silence as go ahead. No questions? Yep, go ahead. There's a question.
Yeah. What's the difference between vulnerability and risk?
Vulnerability is the weakness. It's a weakness, and risk is the overall exposure. So vulnerability contribute to the risk. Through the vulnerability, you become more risky. For example, what's the risk of you walking out the door right now without a jacket? You may catch a cold, right? The vulnerability is that, because you're not protecting your body temperature, right? In an IT situation, if your password is really short, right, that opens up the vulnerability because it's short, therefore it's easily exploited. And then what can I do with a short password on your system? That becomes the risk, right? Of course, it depends on what is the system. Banking system versus a password protected Excel sheets and whatnot. So those are very different. And I think if I'm not mistaken, yesterday, so I'm going to go to yesterday's deck. This is yesterday's deck. And of course, it's not there. Maybe it was, sorry, lecture 7. I am jumping fast, so let me know if it's too fast. So right here, it's basically the same thing, but vulnerabilities right here, right? Loopholes, programming mistakes, lack of antivirus, poor security, poor logical or physical security. That's a weakness or loophole, right? So this is a vulnerability. Okay?
Okay.
All right. I'm sure we'll talk about this again and again. But there are big differences between these components. So make sure you understand them. Risk management, what can go wrong? Yeah, we talk about those. CS315 again. This is a different CS315 paragraph asking us to do have a thorough understanding. This is basically risk, right? Significance of the risk, likelihood, what actions to take, and identify those who are relevant. So this is NIST 800-30. It's one of the many standards and telling you how to do a risk assessment. We've gone through this exercise in this particular deck, right? So we focus on those 6 components just because the other 3 we weren't able to do because it was a fictitious situation, right? So categorizing them, identifying the risk, right? So you have the official definition right here. Threat, and then a vulnerability right here, and also the likelihood, the impact, the overall risk, and so on, right? And I think we did talk about that. If I'm not mistaken, there was a quiz question on this as well. So for this question or this discussion, we were merely focusing on three of the components: vulnerability, i.e. weakness, the threat who can cause the harm, as well as the rest, the resulting, scenario situation. So let's see. All right. If you do have questions, feel free to raise your hand. But like I said, we're gonna go back to this again and again, I'm pretty sure, just because it's a key component. So now, whoops, this is I forgot which lecture. I think lecture 3. No, lecture 7. So now we're moving on to, I believe, lecture 4. Lecture 4. Lecture 4 talks to the applications, specific applications, and the input, processing, output. Those are the key things. And let me see if there's anything worth discussing on this deck. Some of those different development, end user development is generally not a good idea. I did say that in the video as well, just because you don't want the end user to be developing. End users may not be fully aware of the requirements. Right? End users, who are end users? You and I are end users. If we're developing something, an application, assuming we have the capabilities, then we're developing something that is just fit for our needs. We don't like passwords, so therefore the application has no passwords. So it fits the user's need. However, it may not meet the enterprise requirement from a security, from a operations, and so on and so forth. So end users typically are not very generally not a good idea. As you can see, there's more risk than benefits. So web applications, majority of the applications that you guys are using, we are using are web applications, which means that we're accessing it from the web, from the internet. Any banking applications, foreign exchange applications, Gmail, things like that. Not Gmail on your mobile phone, but Gmail, you're logging onto Gmail, things like that. Those are all examples of web applications. Some of these are very important, but I think it goes beyond our discussion. So just merely having them there, you can always go back to them or do a search, right? Do a Google search and see what does that really mean. Some of them we did talk about. Those are the key things: input, processing, output, which we talked about many, many times. And there are specific controls. Some of these are automated corrective controls, detective controls, and things like that, right? So let's see. The other deck has a little bit more information, so I am going to go to the other deck and just go through it really quick. So video, internal control, change management. Change management is a big thing. I think some of those change managements are being discussed in the operations deck. So let me just open up slide lecture 4. So applications, this layer primarily it's a thick circle. Enterprise application, front end, back end, consumer focused, are all applications. There are some what we call the utility software. Antivirus, for example, it's an application, but it runs basically on this layer. Monitoring software, things like that, those are some examples of it. Application controls, we focus a lot on input, processing, output. This is where we also, I think, introduced the concept of upstream and downstream. And we use the example of Interact. Upstream, downstream applies to different applications, not within one application, right? So you may say one application received the information from upstream and then passed the information to downstream applications. But you do need multiple applications to illustrate upstream and downstream, right? So it's not talking about merely within one application. If it's just everything handles within that one application, then there's almost no needs for upstream and downstream. Like Gmail, you just send in Gmail, right? But some other applications passes the information or pass the information to other applications for further processing, for one reason or another. Then there is the upstream and downstream situation. Change management is making changes. Why do we need to make changes? It's all there. changes to any of these layers are considered to be under change management just because, it's controlling change. CS330 talks to change management as well, the importance of change management. I think this is yeah, this is the class we did not. Yeah, we created the cloud, I think. Cloud server, it's right here, Linux. All right, any questions on applications? Lecture 5, for some reason, I don't know why. This is operations. We talked about this yesterday as well. What does operation mean, right? It's just running something, operating. So, IT operations, day-to-day function, including software and hardware. I don't know how to close this AI thing high for this session. Policy procedures, and so I'm going to see whether or not there's anything exciting or interesting to see before moving on to the other deck. Physical security access, environmental control, let's see, cloud backup. Yeah, this is also the lecture we introduced BCP and DRP because they are part of operations, disasters, DRP components. All right, so I am going to move to the class discussion deck, lecture 5. Operations, operating every single layer right there, right? Everything needs to be operated, needs to be running. Just think about your home, right? Your network has to be working, your computer has to be working, your home has to be working, I suppose, providing you heat, electricity, and things like that. And then your system, Mac OS or Windows, has to be working. I didn't put Mac OS again because Mac OS is more a user operating system than a enterprise applications. There may be enterprise users who are using Mac more for group design and other purposes, but generally speaking, the backend, rarely would you see a Mac system. Database, applications, keeping them running, right? So those are all applications, examples of applications. Policy procedures, they're all, all of that list, they are all documentation, but to I wouldn't test you on the definition of them. I would not ask you to differentiate them, but just make sure you understand that they are different, right? And if anything, policies and procedures would likely be those that we focus on because those are the more popular ones. Policies are overarching, high level, thou shalt do this. And then procedures are typically step by step. How do you go about doing it? Right? U of T requires you to adhere to certain user acceptance standard, right? So that may be a standard, but that's a policy. Spelling out the standard, it's in the standard. And then how do you go about making sure security is being enforced and so on? Windows password or how to log on to U of T's Wi-Fi, those are procedures. This again, we talked about many times as well. So hopefully, even though this course is comprehensive, though the exam is comprehensive, but many of these concepts we talked about, again and again and again. Albeit that, we apply those concepts into different components, but it's the same concept, right? Design versus operating effectiveness. Yesterday in the DigitalOcean case, we saw the suitability of the design, the system description, first of all, suitability of design, and operating effectiveness. This was the first time we introduced point in time and period of time, or also known as type 1 and type 2 report. Right, type 1 and type 2 are SOC specific, but if we want to be generic, then we refer to as point in time and period of time, right? Balance sheet and income statement. We had the philosophical debate, which is better. And, I have a preference. Well-designed policy not being followed or fully compliant to policy that have omissions. I like fully compliant just because it's easy to change, the policy than the culture or people's mindset. But that's just me. You can argue, different ways. Now, access control, again, we talked about physical versus logical, right? Who has access to what is access control? Controlling the access. right? Controlling physical access, um, lock door, lock drawers, biometric control doors, things like that. Those are physical. And then there's your logical, right? Controlling access to something that's logical, right? Systems, components, systems, applications, software, things like that. Those are examples of logical controls. And then the logging of access is the audit trail, right? Maintaining logs. It could be video logs, it could be timestamp entries, things like that. Those are examples of physical logs. BCBDRP, I think you should know fairly well. Any questions so far? I'm slightly behind. I hope to wrap this up in 35 minutes. We have two more lectures to go. Case day, there's nothing, and then security. Just two more lectures, so it's not too bad. Security lecture, maybe I should use this deck first. Security. Security is big because cyber has always been a big topic in general, and also we spent two lectures on it, right? The simulation is also on security as well. So let's take a quick look. Security, why is it important? CIA model. Although the book is talking about CAI rather than CIA, but CIA is easier to understand or to remember, I believe. Make sure you understand the differences between the C, the I, and the A, right? So the other deck, we would go into that a little further. Mobile device management, Internet of Things, security threats, COVID. Those are all security specific frameworks. All right, nothing much. And if you need to go back to it, you already have the recordings. Security, what can go wrong? Everything. It covers everything. Similar to operations, right? TRA again, we talked about that. We just talked about that maybe 20 minutes ago. But specifically when we look at security, then it's what kind of weakness, security weakness, and what kind of security threats, right? That can cause a security exposure. So depending on which topic we're talking about, same concept, but applying in different areas. What can go wrong? I feel like we just reviewed that yesterday before the quiz, so I'm not going to spend too much time there. The intrusion prevention system, it could be an example of an automated corrective control, right? Something that's automated and correcting. UPS power, can be correcting as well. That's an automated way. Roles and responsibilities. So let's see, auditing. And then these are very specific attacks. Class A, Class B in the morning. The quiz question was piggybacking. And the other one was on corrective controls for the other class. All right. I'm not going to review the lecture from yesterday because it was just talked about yesterday, unless you want me to. The SOC report, it should be rather fresh in your mind. I'll pause for a second and see if anyone has any questions before I move on to the... My internet is a little choppy, so I'm going to turn off my video, and but you can still hear me. I am going to bring up the quiz questions if nobody has any questions. Quizzes 1 and 2, I believe, has been discussed, but let's just go through them really quickly. Sharing screen right now. 1 second, sorry. So these have been discussed. I think you can see it. This has been discussed, so I'm not going to spend too much time. What is meant by IT general controls? This was quiz 1. And this, the first question is always the morning question. The second question is always the afternoon, the question for the afternoon class. What is meant by IT general controls? Why is IT auditing important? This is, the super easy quiz. I think everyone got a pretty good grade on it. So we did take it up already. I just want to refresh your memories in terms of this is what we talk about. You will not get something similar in the on the exam just because it is too short and too generic. Stop sharing, and I am going to pull up the second quiz. Let me just open them all up. Bear with me, a couple more seconds. I hope my old computer can handle that many files. All right, so I'm going to share again. All right, so the quiz two, the morning class got this question: explain what does interconnected mean in the context of audit scope. Right, using coffee machine as an example, we're saying that interconnected basically means that even though something is immaterial, it can, if they're connected, then it can be used as a launch point or connecting point to some other systems that may matter. And so, this is where we talk about materiality may or may not matter just because coffee machine is worth $200, $100. But if they're on the network, they may be used to breach other system on the same network, right? So, this is the first question. The second question was the perimeter. We're saying, yeah, it goes beyond the Wi-Fi signal just because Wi-Fi may extend the signal outside the perimeter of UTM by another 100 feet, 100 meter. Doesn't really matter, but all the systems are connected. You can be, logging onto the UFT network from home or from a different country via VPN or Quarkus or Acorn and stuff like that. So that's, the traditional perimeter no longer works, right, to define the network. And we need to identify the point that allows, external parties or internal parties to connect from outside. So that's the key for this one. Quiz three, uh, I'm gonna reduce the, let's see. In class, this is morning class, we discussed vulnerability is the weakness that can be exploited by a threat. For each of the threats, each of the threats below, identify an example of a vulnerability and how the threat can take advantage of a vulnerability you identify, right? So car thief vulnerability is open window. This was, I think, just follow on our discussion. My little example, the open window, you leave you leave your phone on the dashboard, door unlocked, things like that, or key there and whatnot, right? That's a vulnerability. And the threat, what is the threat, right? So first of all, the threat is bystanders walking by and whatnot. How can they take advantage of the vulnerability? Well, if it's an open door, then they can just open the door. The window open, then they can just reach into the into the window, into the car, and get your phone and so on, right? So, fairly self-explanatory. Computer virus again. The example of a vulnerability is typically an unpatched system, or somehow the virus came through or received by you. So any of your applications, for example, email applications, um, email filtering, or anything like that, or antivirus is not able to stop the virus, right? So the lack of antivirus, it's a vulnerability, right? How the threat can take advantage of it. The virus, how can the virus take advantage of the vulnerability? Well, because it's not being quarantined, not being caught, the virus. Therefore, the virus can do its thing depending on what the virus is programmed to do. Capturing your password, deleting content, encrypting your content. This is ransomware, right? Encrypting your content and then holding you ransom for money to unlock it. So that's the morning class. Afternoon class. In IT, risk is normally defined as what can go wrong. Identify what can potentially go wrong if an auditor performs an audit without performing a risk assessment. This one is a little bit more philosophical, right? You do an audit, but you don't do a risk assessment. And earlier, even today, we talked about the fact that without doing a proper risk assessment, you don't know what you're auditing, right? So you may be spending your precious or limited audit resources, audit time on something that does not matter, right? So what can go wrong is that you don't identify any material weaknesses that may impact financial statement, financial reporting. That's one possibility of what can go wrong, right? Or you identify something that's immaterial just because you don't do a risk assessment, you just don't know, um, where you should focus your attention on. So that's along the same, along the lines of where you should, how you should tackle this problem. Right. Always go back to the thinking process and the application. And this course, because it's a graduate level course, is never going to be memorization, right? You need to really understand, the content, the idea, and so on, and then be able to apply that. So next one, quiz 4. In the morning class, it is we discuss the concept of upstream, downstream. Uh, the output of an application can be the input of another application, right? Even here, I articulated that, yeah, there are two applications, right? Output of application one becomes the input of application two. Interact is a classic example because we did talk about it in class, right? Interact from your bank passes on to Interact. Interact passes to the recipient's bank. They don't have to be the same bank, right? So shopping cart, you can talk about that. How do you pay for it? Maybe paying by PayPal, right? I trust all of you have used PayPal before. If everything is staying within the Amazon angle, within the Amazon, or you pay under eBay or something like that, then there may not be an upstream downstream. But PayPal is a good example. You pay by PayPal, then the one of the whatever your shopping site, you put in the shopping cart, and then when you need to pay, you hit PayPal. That information is being sent to PayPal. PayPal receives. PayPal becomes the downstream app, receive the information, process it, and then pass it back to the application, saying, "Yep, this payment this payment has been accepted or approved." The other thing is a lot of applications now is sign on using your Google account or something like that, right? This is another example of a upstream downstream. You sign on to a particular application, non Google, but they use that application or that website uses Google as they sign in. So upstream, downstream, pass the authentication information to Google. Google say yay or nay about your authentication, and then comes back. Right? So upstream, downstream, same thing. Are we all okay with that? I don't have my chat open. Now I do. Whoops, sorry. I missed a question. Mentioned SOC 3, but I don't recall. Why don't we talk about SOC 3 in just a little bit? For the purpose of the exam, you don't have to worry about it. SOC 3, it's a Trust certification. It's not very popular. That's why I focus more on the SOC 1 and SOC 2. But thank you for pointing it out. Yeah, it is still available, but it's not popular as popular. So in the industry, so I decided just to mention it and not go into it. But thank you for that. This is quiz, I forgot what it was, 4 maybe, for class A. Class B, sorry, afternoon class is class A. It's always doing things in reverse, I don't know why, but CS 315, identify failure to make necessary changes to systems or program is as bad as making unauthorized changes. Discuss why. So the TA graded this, so I don't know if anyone used the example of Windows 11, Windows 10. Failure to make necessary changes to systems or programs, right? If Windows 10 is not being supported, or if there are significant vulnerabilities that you don't address, right, that becomes a big vulnerability or a weakness that something else, such as a virus or an attacker, can take advantage of, right? So making unauthorized changes is bad because those changes are not authorized, but you didn't make necessary changes, it's going to be as bad. So CS 315 discussed that. So this one is, again, a fairly simple question. It's just how you elaborate your answer, right? So you need to have a full understanding, a thorough understanding of what it means, and then be able to apply that. So this is, I cannot remember if this was a past exam question, but I wouldn't be surprised because this one has some depth to it, requiring you to articulate, to analyze, and then to, defend your argument. Questions, comments? I think it's quiz five. Without providing the definition, explain the relationship between a BCP and a DRP, right? And this one we did talk about quite a bit, and many of you still gave me the definition. You can still do that, but it will not gain you any grades, right? You can use that um, to help you articulate your following argument, but basically one plan drives the other, right? Why do you need? And I did talk about it yesterday as well, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Why do you need to continue the business? Because there is a situation that impacted your ability to implement, to continue. 9/11 was an example, power outage was an example, and so on and so forth, right? During a power outage situation, you still have to continue your business, right? So this BCP a lot of times is driven by a disaster, right? They are related because after a disaster, those two things are required. After a disaster, you need to recover from it as well as to continue, right? Can your business wait until you recover from it and then continue? Well, it depends on how long it would take for you to recover, right? If your system has been stolen and the homework is due tonight, what are you going to do? Right? You accidentally drop your computer and then it's gone, right? Well, let's see if you have cloud backup, save it onto Office 365 backup, or reverting to a copy. Maybe you have emailed someone a copy or something like that, right? So you still have to continue, but being able to continue does not mean the same thing as recovering from it, right? How do you recover from it? Repair your machine if it's repairable, or buy a new machine, and so on, right? So those are two separate things, and one has to do with continuation, but the other one has to do with the recovery. They are related just because my argument is that one drives the other. You have a disaster, and therefore the two plans need to be activated in parallel, right? Unless you can wait, unless you can pause your business, you don't continue your business until you fully recover, which in most cases is not acceptable unless your interruption is less than, I don't know, a day, half a day, depending on who you are, right? Amazon or eBay, you cannot afford more than 2 seconds of downtime or 5 seconds, right? So you have to have a plan. So that's what I'm looking for. Not necessarily a definition, but it's your explanation and articulation. This one, again, we talked about that many times as well. Excuse me. So virtualization, um, and basically is the example of the hotel and the hotel room, right? So there are all kinds of things that can go wrong as an audit concern, such as if you only look at physically, there's only one machine. But logically, it can be tens, if not, I don't know, hundreds of machines. And so, what goes onto the machine, materiality and things like that, that becomes a concern. And secondly, is, the host, security of the host, right? If you're the host, what goes inside those rooms and whether or not you can enter those rooms becomes an audit concern. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? And number three is whether or not a room, a guest can impact the security or operations of another guest or of the host, right? So those are examples of things that we care about just because you share one computer, right? It's a sharing scenario. You're sharing processors. Whoops, you're sharing process. I don't know why I'm highlighting. Try to highlight this. Processors, memory, storage, and the whole computer networking components and things like that. So that's why we need to understand virtualization before we can audit them. Any questions? Last but not least, this was yesterday. Piggybacking. This was the morning class. Identify a preventive control. How do you prevent piggybacking, right? Man trap, people trap, human trap is an example. Or some people, I think, suggested security guard is an example. Some kind of a rotating, those bars, rotating door Things like that, those are all examples, right? It's not rather than an open door, you have some kind of barrier or some kind of some kind of restriction. That would be one example to prevent piggybacking. The other one is detective. How do you detect, right? So actually, a lot of those are both detective and preventive. For example, the rotating or with the man trap, it will lock you there. CCTV monitoring, maybe AI sensing, facial recognition, things like that. Those are all examples of it. And you can go above and beyond to identify corrective, right? So corrective may be the auto locking doors, right, or auto sounding alarms and things like that. Those are examples of corrective controls. This is beyond this question, but I'm just applying just to be complete: prevent, detect, and correct. If you have a security guard there, a physical human being that stop you and not let you go through, that's a manual corrective control, right? Automation, it's auto sensing, and then it automatically locks it. It's an automated corrective control. We are okay with this because the next question is on automated. Well, it was on manual. Well, right here. I'm gonna further reduce it just because it's a long one. Maybe it's a little too small, so I'm gonna do the font. Sorry. So this question, font reduction in font. Corrective controls. So I provided the definition, right? Corrective controls are internal controls, especially in IT auditing, to fix problems after they have been detected. Purpose is to minimize the impact of the incident and restore data or prevent issue from recurring. Antivirus is an example. I call antivirus because it's too easy. That's why I don't want you to use antivirus as an example. That quarantine, infect a file, and remove the computer virus. And then I'm asking you to provide any example of an IT automated corrective and IT manual corrective, right? So any kind of automation, any kind of any kind of automatic fixes, UPS power, it's a good example. I think this morning I tried. Chad gave a lot more example, and many of them are fairly simple to understand. Reject IT. Whoops. Automating IT control. Sorry, corrective. So examples of automated and manual corrective IT controls. See. Incident response, triggering an alarm, IPS, IDS, something we talked about. System recovery, right? Automation recovery, automated patch system, fraud detection system, load balancing. Yeah, these we haven't really talked about load balancing, but IDS, IPS, triggering an alarm, things like that, manual rollback, manual reconciliation, reconfiguration, sorry, incident management, manual data recovery. So it's basically a lot of things that you do on a manual basis. Recovering from a USB key, that's an example of a manual control, right? So any of those will work. If you come up with a different example, that's fine. But the key thing was whether or not you have a good understanding on corrective control, right? So you may see something like that. It may throw you off because it looks like a long question, but the real question is just right here, right? The rest of them are actually information for you. Pause for a second and see if anyone has any questions. So we talked for about an hour now. I know I kind of rushed into a lot of the information, but many of the information, we've talked about already, and I made changes to the font. That's why it's asking me to save every single time. So let me just close this again. I do have a little slide deck, just a couple slides. Sorry. Oh, I hate this Zoom. uh, sorry, uh, lectures tutorial. This it's so short. A lot of the information I posted already. Excuse me. So this is something that we talked about yesterday. Just a reminder for those of you who might have missed the discussion. Close book exam, 3 hour exam, 9 o'clock to noon on Friday. I haven't come up with the full exam yet. I do have some questions, but I plan to do that later on today. And then photocopying on Thursday, and then it'll be ready by Friday. Likely going to be 4 to 5 short answers, a short case, and if needed, use examples to illustrate. So here are more tips. Read the questions very carefully, especially I saw the chat about the coffee machine. I'll get to it in just a little bit. Let me finish this. The Especially the multiple choice questions. Multiple choice questions are I wouldn't say tricky, but sometimes, which one of the following is not an example of, right? You may say it's tricky, but it may come across that way. And therefore, without reading the full question, you see an answer that you feel like is correct, then you answer that. But, in fact, it wasn't what the question was asking about. So make sure you read it very carefully. That's my first tip. And if the question is not asking, well, right here, if the question is asking for explanation, analysis, and whatnot, you don't need to provide a definition. It will not gain you any grades. Secondly, is pay attention to the allocation of marks for that question, right? So if it's a 10-mark question, writing 2 sentences is not going to get you 10 marks, right? So does it mean that you have to write 10 points? Not necessarily, because point forms, you may use point forms, but generally speaking, point forms is not really a good answer without explanation, right? So I still want to see explanations and whatnot from you, in addition to just point forms. All right. What to write and how much to write. So this is for you to decide. Because it's always the quality that matters, but sometimes even though you're hitting all the right points, but you're not articulating in a short answer format, then you may get a point or two deducted from it. Okay, so articulate point forms are definitely okay. You can say, use point forms in an intelligent manner. That's perfectly fine. But just in a comprehensive question, right? It doesn't mean that you have to write 10 books. It's a booklet scenario. I don't anticipate you needing 2 books. So one book is good enough. Double space, single space is up to you. It's a graduate level course. I don't like to be micromanaging. Just do whatever you feel is the right thing to do. Focus on the application of the concept. Right. This application does not mean an internet application. I'm saying application of the particular concept. Elaborate on your thinking process, the rationale, explanation, analysis, and not the definition, or repeating something that's in the question or case facts, right? That's no use. So that's basically at a high level. Just make sure you have a good understanding of the content. That would be important. So I know that there are 2 questions from the chat, and I'm going to go through them, and you're welcome to think through any questions that you may have as well. So the first question, can you explain the coffee machine example again? Coffee machine example is just one of many examples to illustrate interconnectedness, right? So my machine right now is connected through my home network to my internet provider and then to Zoom, right? So it's now forming a connection, right? And in my home, although I don't, I may have a PlayStation. I may have a Switch, right? Nintendo Switch. I may have other AI machine and things like that on the same network, right? Or maybe even my coffee machine on my network. So audit focus, if my AI machine is holding key components from an audit point of view, I want to focus on something that has the highest materiality. But my coffee machine, if it's connected to the same network to my AI machine, and it has a vulnerability, it can be used to launch an attack onto my AI machine, right? So That's a similar scenario. Many offices have a TV, smart TV, and things like that. They are connected. If they're not separated, they may be connected to their finance application, right? So through the smart TV or coffee machine, they can be used to attack their financial system if they are connected. Okay, so coffee machine is just an example of how things are connected, interconnected. So I use it to illustrate. Does that answer your question, Yang? Yang? All right, so next question. Can you go over CIA in context of information security? Sure. CIA basically forms information security. Confidentiality, um, we're concerned about whether we're concerned whether the information, if leaked, the confidentiality of the information, right? If it's leaked, then it becomes a security threat. For example, the customer record, customer information, credit card information, and things like that. All I need to do is make a copy. I don't need to make changes to it. I just need to make a copy of it, and therefore, your organization is at significant risk if it's leaked, right? So that's an example of confidentiality in the context of security. Integrity basically means that whether or not the information has been changed without your knowledge. So a transaction, for example, Interact transaction, right? Interact transaction, I want to pay you $50, but somehow someone capture the information in the middle, modify it, make it $500. So instead of withdrawing $50 from my bank account, is now withdrawing $500. Unauthorized changes to those transactions is processing integrity, right? So it's processing integrity. So in the process of it, when the information is being processed. Availability basically means whether or not the system is available. UFD's network was not available for a certain time, so it is part of a security concern. ChatGPT was not available for a certain time. Those are some examples, right? So CIA together they are they form the essence of information security. Does that answer your question? I'm going to go forward unless you ask me further questions. Otherwise, it's very difficult to pay attention to the chat. So let me see. Next one, if I'm not missing, are the tech demo going to be tested? Not beyond, so none of those step by step or anything like that, but the conceptual things. For example, virtualization has been tested. Just because we have asked questions about that. Password cracking, I would not ask you how to crack passwords, but I may say, don't be alarmed, don't be surprised to see password cracking on the exam, right? Explain the risk of password cracking, explain how password can be cracked, or something like that. So it's a concept that matters, not the technicality of it, how to go about doing it, or anything like that. I won't ask you how to create a cloud server, but creating a cloud server, how easy is it? Things like that has been discussed, right? So just make sure that you fully understand the concept. Next one, can you explain virtualization, host and guest again? Think about hotel and think about hotel room, right? So the rooms, actually, a big hotel is the host. Hotel rooms are guests. You have a bigger hotel, therefore you can afford a lot more rooms. Some of the rooms are bigger, some of the rooms are smaller. Okay, so that's basically an example of virtualization. You have a very capable server. You dissect that into very small components. In fact, if you remember, I brought in my little computer, right? That's the host. And then I installed through an application called I forgot what it was, VirtualBox. VirtualBox. I created a Windows within Windows and then a Linux within Windows. Those are two hosts within my, sorry, those are two guests within my one host. Did I confuse you? Did I explain it well? Sorry, I was a little confused when I said, or a little too fast when I said host and guest. But hotel is the host; you're hosting it. Guests are being invited, so one of the guests in the on the host, basically on the host system. All right, so next one, virtualization. Would the end of chapter questions in the textbook be helpful? I think so. Just I wouldn't necessarily say the exam, but help you understand the concept, right? It helps you understand the concept a little further. You can test yourself to see whether or not you have a thorough understanding of it. Sophia, can you repeat the key points that would have been mentioned in the implication of failing to make necessary changes? Sure. Do you remember which quiz again? Well, anyways, the failing to make necessary changes means that so first of all, failing meaning that you did not make it. Necessary changes means that those changes are required. So what are examples of required changes? Bugs, fixes, vulnerabilities, and things like that, right? So we approach that question that way because there are required changes, right? Necessary changes, and you fail to make them. So ideally, if you want to tackle that question, is to identify a couple examples of that's why I said, provide examples if you want right here, right? If needed, use example to illustrate. System bugs, computer keeps crashing because there is a bug on the system, or it keeps making a mistake, or security vulnerability, and then you say failing to address those would lead to, the following, right? So that's a good way for you to tackle that question. Is that okay? Does it help you? So yeah, again, you dissect that question, right? Failure, meaning you didn't do it. To make necessary changes, so focus on the word necessary as well, right? So that's how I would approach that. There are a couple more direct messages to me, so I'm going to read through that. There's a question on would I ask you to do a full audit planning memo for the case? No, that's too much. That's too much writing. Would it be mostly I? Would it be mostly? Sorry, risk then procedure. Yeah. So if anything, I haven't come up with the exam yet, but don't be surprised to see something similar to what we illustrated yesterday because we spent an hour talking about that yesterday, right? The objectives, and then the control activities, and then how do we go about auditing it, right? So what are we satisfying, right? Here's the objectives or the activities, and if you're the auditor, what kind of procedures would you have to perform to satisfy those, objectives. So no, yeah, writing an audit memo may be a little too much, a little too heavy writing. Yeah, and I don't think it's going to be on the exam. Let's see. I believe I addressed all the questions in the chat. So if I haven't, it's buried somewhere. So feel free to just raise your hand or something and then just point me to it. I know it's quite a bit of information, but the good thing is our exam is on Friday. Today is only Wednesday, I think. Yeah, Wednesday. So you still have a good day today, and then tomorrow. I will do my best if you send me a question, an email. I will do my best to address it. So one last thing before I lose you is whoops, I don't want to show you that. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing and show you the quickest. All right, I will show you quickest again. I have posted, I posted where did I post it? Quiz. So you should be able to see a practice quiz. I'm going to view it as student and see if I can see it. Yeah. So practice questions, you should be able to see this. Once you enter it, I set up as a practice, so you can do it as many times as you want. And so I'm going to go to my teacher view. All right, so go to my teacher view. You can see more. And I'm going to do the edit. Oh, some of you have already taken the exam or the quiz, right? So I think it's 5 multiple choice questions, and then several questions. You can expect something similar. And if I'm not mistaken, I provided the general answer comments right there as well, right? So well, this one is on CIA, so there's some CIA right there. And excuse me. And so these questions, they do have some elaboration on general answer the comments and things like that. So feel free to go through them. It would, I don't know what that is. So yeah, this one it's a longer suggestions on the answer. So that's something you do have. You're welcome to go through them. It's not going to count towards your final grade. How do you crack a password? Depends on which password you want to crack. This password is easy because the exam is not there, so you don't cracking it doesn't matter. The exam is on the well, I haven't come up with the exam yet, so um, even cracking my password right now would not be helpful. You can get the exam. The exam will be ready hopefully by tomorrow, tonight, tomorrow. Hope that answers your question, Sophia. Any other questions or comments, concerns? In the context of simulation, I showed you, so you weren't joking. How do we crack it? So typically, it's utilizing a software. Depending on the password, Windows password, Linux password, router password, things like that. Each password has different. It uses different encryption algorithm. But a lot of those algorithms are known just because those are popular, very well-known applications, and therefore they're known to the general public. So utilizing the correct software and then having the correct having the correct computer capability of computers that would be that would be important for you to crack that password. Does that answer your question? All right. Any further questions or comments? Are we going to get any feedback for the in-class assignment before in-class assignment? I think you would be able to get the which in-class assignment? Are you talking about the quiz or the case study? The case the case study, I think the grade has been posted. Sorry, the grades have been input into the system. I will do my best to review them and release it. But in general, I think the grades are fairly good. So the simulation, unfortunately, will likely not be, but the simulation grades, in general, it's not bad as well, just because the in-class component, I think majority of you showed up and you completed it. Although not very many students participated, so participation was a big component, for that as well, which we did talk about during class. But the video, it's going to take time for us to analyze. So the case study, I'm pretty sure that I'm fairly confident that it can be shared. Any further questions, comments, concerns? I can stay on for a little bit until 10:30 or so if you do want to chat a little further. But if there's no questions, then you're welcome to sign off. Thank you again for joining the tutorial. I hope this course makes sense. I hope the tutorial makes sense. Tutorial is compressed, highly compressed. But hopefully you learn a lot, and if you have, I wish you all the best for the exam, and then your rest of the course and graduation and your work term and whatnot. So hopefully I may see you in professional context or academic context in another way. All right, so thank you very much, guys. I'll stay on for a little bit if you guys want to chat. Oh, I didn't know that I don't have camera. I gave you many thumbs up, but thank you, guys, thank you. All right. Thank you, guys.